In this video, we'll show you how to work with request parameters. The first part of the line represents the actual endpoint, or its URL. The part after the question mark represents request parameters, the name and value. Name equals value. The parameters are separated by an ampersand. You'll notice that we have 3 parameters in this example. Let's experiment by using the endpoint from our old example with books and authors. Because the endpoint isn't public, we must generate a session for the existing user. Copy the endpoint URL and paste it into Postman for testing. Now, send a GET request. It worked. As you see, we've already used 2 parameters, the application ID, which is the app's ID, and session ID, the user session. Both parameters are standard, and the app ID is mandatory. There are additional parameters like paging control. For example, the API sends back 4 objects. A standard page includes 30, but we can specify the page size parameter, so let's set it to 3. The API will then send back 3 objects and indicate that there are 2 pages in total. Note that the URL now has a new parameter. Page size equals 3. If we also define another new parameter, page equals 0, we get the same result because, by default, 0 is the number of the first page. If we request page number 1, which is actually the second page, we get 1 object, which is on the second page. If we remove these parameters, we get 4 objects again. There's also a parameter responsible for sorting. It's called sort. The value field for this parameter should contain the name of the field by which we want to sort, a comma, and the required sorting order, ASC for ascending order and DESC for descending. It's important to note that the sorting we configured through our request parameters has higher priority than sorting configured in the endpoint API. Another parameter is called format, which is empty by default. Let's add it. We can see it in the URL, but if we pass its value, head, the API only sends 1 object, the first, and it can be combined with sorting, and then the first object will change. Now, let's see how to use arbitrary request parameters. Let's remove all unnecessary parameters. The endpoint sends 4 objects, and we see that the owner is not equal to the user ID in the filters. Let's remove that condition for now and see what happens. The endpoint sends all 6 objects from the data structure. Let's add a parameter, and we'll call it owner. You can give it any name you want, as long as it doesn't contain spaces. If we pass some value to this parameter, we see that nothing changes, because we haven't had any filters configured yet. Add a new filter. The owner field is equal to the value of the parameter. The expression should be in double curly braces, and the HTTP request part should start with capital letters, then a dot, and the name of the parameter. In our case, owner. It doesn't have to be the same as the field name. And now, the API only sends 2 objects. Let's add 1 more field to read, owner, to make it even more clear. Check it, and now the filtering is correct. Let's remove this parameter, and again, we'll get 4 objects with an empty owner field. We need to use coding mode to ignore conditions with parameters if a parameter isn't set. You'll see how to use that in the documentation. Insert the expression in which the any condition means that either the first or second conditions is met. The second means that the parameter is equal to the owner field, and the first means that the parameter is not set. Let's check what the API returns. In this case, the API returns all the objects. Let's reset the parameter value, and now we get 2 objects. It works as expected. You can also combine complex expressions for filters using the operators any and all.